You're watching the National Marijuana News.
As the United States opens itself up to the acceptance of marijuana, a whole new population of people will be using the plant for all sorts of benefits and mostly for the first time. But in order for patients to truly feel safe about what they're consuming, testing, standardization, and regulation of cannabis will have to be a priority for state governments that make it legal. And if the federal government one day decides to make it legal as well, the formation of a group similar to the Food and Drug Administration would not be such a far-fetched idea. In order to gauge exactly how dispensaries are testing and regulating their medicine, the National Marijuana News set out to visit pot shops across the Los Angeles area. We wanted to find out if the dispensaries are operating safely with the best interest of the patients at heart.
This is a special report from the National Marijuana News.
After deciding to use the Diablo OG strain as the test subject, we went to a handful of dispensaries posing as first-time patients.
Hi, how are you? I'm a patient.
Standard protocol during the first visit is to present your medical recommendation for processing and to fill out a few sheets of paper, signing off on a handful of responsibilities, like promising you won't take the marijuana you buy and distribute it or sell it to others. All of the dispensaries followed that strict protocol before we were allowed into the main rooms that contain dozens of different strains of cannabis, from the relaxation-inducing indicas to the energetic sativas and in-between hybrids. During one visit, the bud tenders clearly explained what to expect from smoking the strain.
This is the first time I'm going to try this. So what could I expect in terms of?
Definitely don't go if you're looking to, if you need to do anything afterwards. I would definitely do it at nighttime or downtime, whenever you're just trying to relax and kick back.
But we weren't able to get an answer as to whether they tested it and if they were aware of the THC content within it. We also noticed that while the bud tenders there were attractive and professional, they didn't use gloves when handling the cannabis, meaning anything that was on their hands was attaching itself to what they were about to sell us. The location itself was set up nicely, but a better explanation of their testing process would have made for a much better experience. I wonder how many sets of hands touch this cannabis before it's ingested by a patient. At another collective, we walked into an incredibly professional environment where the bud tenders wore scrubs and rubber gloves.
Your patient.
When we asked for the Diablo OG THC content, he guessed 25.
On the Diablo, it's last batch was 25, but this is a new batch, so I don't want to tell you 25.
Yeah.
So he went and grabbed an iPad which had the latest testing numbers.
This new batch, we haven't tested it yet.
Oh, okay. But does it usually average out around there?
Yeah. Usually like 20 hours.
And you guys have the results of the testing? You guys put that up anywhere?
Yeah, it's on email.
Sweet.
This was a decent shopping experience based on the way the staff conducted themselves through the process, the cleanliness of the collective, and overall knowledge of their product. Even though the bud tender was wearing gloves this time, gloves protect the hands, not the product. During a visit to one dispensary, they didn't have the Diablo OG strain, but the welcoming bud tender was open to explaining their process for testing and how they collect their knowledge on their batches.
And in terms of like THC content, does it vary from time to time in terms of the strain? Will it vary, or do you test it?
You
or?
mean like the same strain?
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff we do grow.
Okay.
So as, like, I don't know if you know anything about growing, but in growing, every batch is going to be different. Yeah, every batch is going to be different, but we're always trying to make them better and better.
Cool.
The only things that we do test is our $15 gram.
Okay.
And that's why they are priced up at that. Like heart attack, I can tell you, is a 27% THC.
Another point of reference is that we called ahead to see if they had the Diablo OG, and the person who answered the phone told us yes.
All right, cool. Thank you. Have a great day. Nice meeting you too. Take care.
When we went to go pick up our next sample, the bud tenders said that knowing the THC content for the strains depended on if the growers of the batches reported it to them.
So do you guys get details on like the content when you get your batches?
If the grower comes in with the test results, I'm not sure if we've started sending our meds to SC Labs yet or certain test results yet. I'm sure that's something we will be interested in.
But the flower just depends on the grower?
Depends. I'm not quite sure if our outdoor management wants to start sending our stuff to the lab.
Yeah.
I know it's a little bit pricey. So we might have to wait a little bit.
Totally.
This shop was fairly shoddy in appearance and fairly amateur, but they did admit that they had just taken over management at the collective and were remodeling their surroundings. Again, is this a clean and safe place for patients?
There you go.
Perfect. Thank
Thanks
you
for coming in.
so much. Have a great day. Thank you.
When we collected our final sample, we were actually given the most direct and concise information straight from the dispensary owner.
Do you guys test all your stuff? Yeah. What's the content in that?
About 28%.
28.
In average.
Nice.
But again, he enforced the fact that just because something is named one thing doesn't mean that's what it really is.
Diablo here and Diablo somewhere else, it doesn't mean it has to be same Diablo. A lot of people make up the names because they are not in that country, so they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
The owner oozed with confidence, claiming his Diablo OG strain and all of his other strains were the best and most consistent in Los Angeles County. The collective itself wasn't upscale. It was in a lower income neighborhood, and the nondescript shop was sandwiched between mechanics and other industrial businesses. This was actually a good experience for us, solely because of how the owner did business with us and showed a passion for what he was doing.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to meet you.
We called many dispensaries that said they had the OG strain that we wanted, but many of them said they had it and didn't. So we went to one other dispensary. When we walked in, it was clearly an unprofessional setup.
Thank you.
The inside was easily the most subpar shop we visited. And although this dispensary didn't have the Diablo OG, they did offer us a free dab.
And you guys get a free dab no matter what. And you get the same kind of special.
Dabbing is the latest craze in marijuana use, where a highly concentrated form of cannabis is made into an oil and smoked at high temperature out of a bong or other smoking device.
Very strong, stronger than hash. When you hit it, it's going to rip your lungs. What I always tell people is, when you back up off of it, you take like 2.
Yeah.
No.
Just let it out. Just let it out.
The issue with this was that offering dab hits to patients before they leave the dispensary is 100% illegal. Another problem was that the bud tender never wore gloves, and he spent our time together constantly wiping his face and nose and even shook hands with us. So it was quite apparent that we didn't get a sanitary experience here. On top of that, they didn't seem confident about their product and weren't aware of any THC content in their collection of strains.
Do you know what the THC content is for these? No? You don't test?
This is another example of unsanitary dispensaries and people willing to break the law. When we wrapped up, we took our samples back to the office and logged the information in our records before taking them to the lab to be tested for accuracy and consistency. When we got the results back a few days later, we were surprised but not shocked to see that nothing in the 4 strains was consistent with the claims that were made at each of the dispensaries. The first dispensary had a THC content of close to 12%, which is way below the standard average for the Diablo OG strain, which tends to fall between 20 and 25. So we're not even sure if this was the Diablo OG strain. The shop also did pass its microbiological testing, meaning it just didn't contain anything like coliforms, E. coli, yeast, or mold, which is definitely a good thing. The second shop almost lived up to its claims, with a THC content of just over 23%. They said it was around 25%. This dispensary also got the all clear in the microbiological tests. At the third shop we went to, you may recall they didn't know anything about their THC content. They left that up to the individual growers. But we found out and were surprised to see a higher than normal level at just over 26%. Then, in an even more surprising twist, we found that this particular batch had failed its microbiological tests after yeast and mold were detected. I'm not sure you want yeast or mold in the medicine that you take, so this is clearly unsafe for human consumption. As for the last shop, test results showed the owner, although confident, was not truthful about his THC content. After claiming his Diablo OG strain checked in at 28%, the results showed it checked in at just under 20%. So we can't really confirm that he's actually getting his cannabis tested. The numbers are drastically different, or he's just guessing at his number. His batch also did pass all of its microbiological testing. In conclusion, 25% of the dispensaries we visited failed their microbiological testing. And 100% of the collectives gave us inaccurate representations of the strains they were selling. So it's fair to conclude that it was never really known what strains were actually being tested at the lab. Was the Diablo OG really Diablo OG? We just don't know. And another question to ask ourselves, is this what patients have to look forward to if marijuana is legalized nationally? Through its investigation, the National Marijuana News found that although marijuana is beginning to slowly be considered a medicine, it is clearly not being regulated like one. Patients are submitting to the recommendations of dispensary workers, who most of the time aren't even sure of the product they're carrying. On top of that, they themselves are relying on the growers, who could be telling them what they want to hear, or even worse, adding harmful chemicals to their plants in order to increase the THC content. Over the last few years, through studies and medical reports, pro-marijuana organizations, doctors, activists, and dispensary owners have proven that the plant can be a health benefit for a multitude of ailments and for people of all ages. And in 2014, 2 more states and Washington, D.C. joined Colorado and Washington State when they said yes to the recreational legalization of cannabis. But even with all of that progress, it is clear to see that without proper standardization and testing, a proper regulation system, and a safety and education program put into place, the marijuana industry might fail and may still be looked at with the same unforgiving stigma it has worn for the last 70 years.
You've been watching the National Marijuana News.